Carrie, smile. Christy, 1, 2, 3. There's it. Not everybody. Oh, wow. Yeah, that's fun. I'm just saying, the whole thing. But I got for a couple of days.
She needs to keep talking. That's I forgot to punch him yesterday. Yeah, he's so hard to do that.
I didn't feel like stiff, but now I do.
No, I think you're right. It's like,
yeah, that's better than being Who asked her about I will. Just the top one is not a long time I didn't know the regular
think someone you could have quick rest. You're short, that's correct. So I will leave that. Okay, that's the thing. Otherwise, and Ryan, so that is it. Yeah, I was wondering about well, they had a call meeting inside of it rather than change. We're in town together.
Well, good morning, friends. We want to go ahead and get started here. I've told several people that I woke up a little sad this morning. I kind of do the post-event letdown things. I'm already thinking about you going home. So some people get excited about that, and I get sad. So anyway, that's the weird quirkiness that God made me with. But I am just really so glad to have been here with you and have this opportunity to be up here at Quaker Haven. I just think it's been great. So thank you. And we will move into our final business, reading the final epistle. After our worship and after Tom shares, and then we'll probably cut you loose to put together the final clean up your room. And if there are people who have volunteered to help, we'll put down whatever tables we can put down, and then we'll stack chairs on both sides if we can. That really helps the camp staff when they come in here and try to vacuum and not have to move all the chairs. So they can go both directions, and we can stack them up for them. And any questions or things you're wondering about as we're kind of winding some things down? Yes, Norma.
Those of us in cabins, what do we need to do? Leave windows up, close them, sweep them?
I would
close windows. You can sweep if you want to.
Yeah.
What about trash?
Yeah.
They'll take care of it.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to, you could pull it up and tie it off and set it out front of your door, and but that's not required. If you're in Friendship, please take apart the bunk beds. And no, I'm just kidding. Just make sure if you can to look underneath and get all your stuff, and that will do it. So, are you ready for us this morning? All right.
Are you ready for us?
We are.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad that we are here together still for one more day. I'm enjoying this sunshiny weather. And I guess I should stand up because I can only hear this music. We have a song to start with that was brand new to me, but it's a favorite of Tom's. And he says everybody knows it. So I hope that's true, that you know it. So please help me sing it. But it is a lovely song. It's one of those, I don't know if you've ever done earwigging. Maybe that's not a thing for you. But this is my earwigging song for this week. How can I keep from singing?
And it's one of Tom's favorite songs. It was sung at his wedding. So, yeah, let's...
Moment of silence.
The Lord reigns. He is sovereign. He is good. He is faithful. The world is full of tragedy and sorrow and injustice and pain, and yet the Lord still reigns. And we have the assurance from His eternal word that in the end, His kingdom will have the victory. Hallelujah. How can we keep from singing? Amen?
You get that one for free. No speaker.
That's pretty cool.
How can I keep from singing? You have to keep keeping a little bit longer than you expect.
The next song that we chose may be familiar to some of you and not familiar to others. It's a more contemporary worship hymn, Yet Not I, But Through Christ Who Lives in Me. So I think the words are worth, if you don't know it, just listen to the words.
How many of you have heard this song before? Yet not I, but through Christ? Okay, you get to sing loud.
Here's my joy, my righteousness. rejoicing, for in my need His power is displayed. As my home, my shepherd will defend me. Through the deepest valley He will bring. All the night has been won, and I shall overcome. Yet not I, but Christ in me. Though faith and dread, I know I am forgiven. The future sure, the price it has been paid. For Jesus bled and suffered for my pardon, and He was raised to overcome the grave. As my hope, my sin has been defeated. Jesus now and ever is my lead. Oh, the chains are released, I can sing, I am free, yet not I, but through Christ in me. In every breath, I long to follow Jesus, for He has said that He will bring me home. And day by day, I know He will renew me, until I stand with joy before the throne. This I hope, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, to my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. To this I hope, my hope is only Jesus. All the glory evermore to Him. When the race is complete, till my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. When the race is complete, till my lips shall repeat, yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I, but through Christ in me. Yet not I, but through Christ in me. The next song, the last song we're going to do here is Be Still My Soul. We've been talking about needing just to calm ourselves before Him. And I think this is a song you know to a favorite tune. So you will enjoy that.
Well, hello, friends.
Hello.
I have been tasked with the pleasure of introducing Tom Rockwell, our speaker today. But before I do that completely, I'd like to give you just a little bit about him that I've learned and a Bible verse that when I think of Tom, I think of this verse. So let me tell you how I met Tom Rockwell. The first time I met Tom Rockwell was at the Quaker Leadership Center, the first one, the big gathering. I believe Tom was still an ESR student. And I had heard he was interested in the associate superintendent position. I don't know if he remembers what I told him when we met, but it might have been something insinuating that maybe you don't really want this job. And I'll explain why first. All right. Now, our associate superintendent is a very important position in this yearly meeting, and you'll be able to tell if you look at the job description. Now, if you look at the job description for the associate superintendent, we just made a new one, which is much better. But did anyone read the superintendent posting when we posted that and what we were looking for in a superintendent? It was one page, and it was probably the person who wrote it's in here, or it might be around. I know Bob was in the committee, but it was a really nice, I think he clerked it, but it was a very nice, kind of kumbaya, let's help this person have their leading, and you can help be with the yearly meeting and direct us and guide us, and we'll work with you. And it was just a very refreshing type of posting to bring people in. And then when we go to hire an associate superintendent, and we add, if you looked at that posting,
Turn the mic on.
Oh, it's not on?
Just put it closer to your mouth.
Oh, I'll hold it closer.
There we go.
Okay. So the associate posting was like, I think 2.5 pages. Or 3. And it was like, all right, you do youth programming, you go to camp for several weeks on end, you do programming for adults for Bible studies, and it had everything so long. And I don't know if you know the history of like the Christian Ed director to associate superintendent transition we made, but I saw Tom as a thriving young man interested in doing ministry, right? Like someone with a passion. And this is no one's fault in this room. I just want to briefly say what the last 5 people in that position, kind of how it ended. The 5th one, 5 ago, he's now a pastor in Indiana yearly meeting, so he was able to like grow and then get that next position. But then the next one, he did it for a few years, and now he's a software developer living in Colorado, working for, I think he was doing some work with the Space Force. Like, he's a brilliant guy. But he's doing that. And then the next one, it was kind of split. And one of them ended up becoming an architect, right? And that's great. He's got his own architecture thing going on. He went to IU, has that going. And then the next one, he felt led, and his wife, he worked here for about 8 months maybe, and then he moved to Japan. So when Tom is, I'm like, well, if Tom takes this job, then maybe in 2 years he's off colonizing Mars. Because it seems to be like the people who take the job, I mean, their lives change and they go on to do great things, but they're not necessarily like here. So, but lucky for me, I was incredibly wrong. Because Tom, as far as doing work, you have some people who are industrious, but they do the wrong work all the time, right? And they're what we call in my industry, when you're looking to hire programmers, you don't want the industrious idiot. The person who goes and they do a lot of work, but it's the work that you always have to follow up and then try to fix what they did. But they then keep making more work. And when Tom, the first time I sent him an email, he got back to me right away. I'm like, this is great. And he gave me a list. It was good. But I was like, oh no. Maybe he's too good. Maybe he's working too much. But as time went on, I learned to realize that Tom's actually the best type of work. He's industrious, but he thinks ahead and he moves ahead. So I've been working with CM&E for a few years. And Tom is one of those people that when you reach out to him, like some of the stuff with retired ministers, Sean took a big lead on that, and Tom, but with like retirement plans and whatnot, I sent them emails last year, like, hey, are we doing this? And they're like, Tom's like, oh, we're already meeting with these people. We're already doing that. And when you're like leading something and you can send that email and you get back, oh, we thought of that and we're looking into that. Now you're like, oh, this is something we can work with. This is great. So when I think of Tom, like that's kind of my interactions with him. He's been great with that. And I want to read this verse that when I think of him, it comes to me. It's James 1:22. It says, but be doers of the word, not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in the mirror. But for when they look at themselves and going away, immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law and the law of liberty and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but the doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. And I have seen few doers. Not in the yearly meeting, but I've seen Few people who do as much as Mr. Rockwell and what he's been doing. And just to put it in a slight context, I think he's written 3 or 4 grant applications already, got them submitted. And when you're a doer like Tom, you're going to do something and they're going to be rejected, right? But he's doing the thing to get the rejection, and he's doing more grant applications. Tom has visited, he said, 4 yearly meetings this year, and he's going to meet with a 5th. Now, I've heard people talking here like, oh, we should meet with these people. We should. Well, now we have someone who is. He's doing his work, he's making these connections. So Tom has been a great blessing to this yearly meeting so far, and I'm looking forward to what he has to say today. So, thanks, Tom.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Well, in the spirit of being a doer of the word and less hearing, I did have a sermon for you, but for the last week, I've been thinking about how I would actually rather talk about the situation of friends in a little more detail. So I have scrapped my sermon, and I'm going to do a little presentation for you. So this is going to be a little more doing focused. I've done something like this for the executive committee before, but I'd just like to take us through the situation sort of culturally, the situation of friends, and look at some organizational thoughts of how we can kind of respond to that. So let's get started. So there's a lot of ways our society has changed in the last 100 years. And these are some very simplistic ways of looking at them. I think the broad change that has happened is people used to live in really close-knit communities where they knew their neighbors, they had people who they relied on, that they could live close to and had deep connections with. And globalization has basically eviscerated all of that. Most people don't know their neighbors. We don't have close communities with deep ties like we used to have. People move. We don't have the kinds of connections we used to have. So that's the broad framework. I picked out 3 things to focus on that I think are particularly relevant to us as Quakers. The first is the decline of Christendom. So it used to be, I'm sure most of you older folks remember a time when you felt societal pressure to be at church. Let me tell you, I feel no societal pressure to be at church. People think it's weird that I go to church at my age. That is totally gone. There's no more pressure to be a part of a religious community in the way that there used to be. And the result is that many, many, many fewer people are a part of religious communities. As with a number of these changes, there's kind of positives and negatives to that. I think if a lot of people were in our meetings because they were just being socially pressured to be there, it's arguably not as great as people who are feeling deeply called to be there, which is kind of the opportunity that's here to us now. Some more negative things that have come along with this sort of decline of Christendom is the politicization of the church. Obviously, some groups align very strongly now with specific political movements in a way that was much less common in the past. I'm sure a lot of you remember times when your meetings were full of people who had different views on both sides, which our yearly meeting is blessed to sort of continue that tradition. We do have people, we have a wide range of views, but the average religious community is no longer that way. There's not typically people from both sides of the political aisle. It's something that's been divided sharply. And there's also been a rise of distrust of religious groups. I think you can think of everything from child abuse scandals to just the lack of belief in institutions that we used to have. We do not have the natural trust of our communities that we used to have. So if you used to look at a survey of who are the most trusted people in the community, pastor would have been right at the top, parish priest would have been right at the top, no longer near the top. Not nearly as trusted as we used to be. So we're dealing with this decline of Christendom, which has its benefits for us, that we are now people who are very faithful and devoted to the cause. We've lost some of the people who were there for social pressures, but we're dealing with a very different situation. Another part of the social changes that have happened are some big family changes. This one in particular, I think, has a lot of benefits. We have a lot more 2 working person households than we would have had in the past. I'm sure most of our older folks remember a time when mom stayed at home, dad went to work. That is no longer the case. That's obviously had enormous benefits for women in our society, that there's now a lot more freedom to have rewarding, fulfilling careers. It's also had some major effects on religious communities. I'm sure a lot of, again, the older folks remember times when there were women who stayed at home who were able to offer a lot of volunteer hours to their church, which is not the way it is now. It also just cut down on busyness for most households so that everybody had more time to offer, which is not the case. This extends to much busier grandparents. I think the number of grandparents putting like 20 hours a week or more into childcare has doubled in the last 20 years. So I think Friends Disaster Service is a great example where it was led by folks who were sort of recently retired, had a lot of energy to offer to those kinds of programs. And now those people are typically doing a lot of grandparenting to support families that are dealing with being 2 working person households. I will speak from my own experience and say that my dad does like 20 hours a week of childcare for us, and we would not be able to do what we do for the yearly meeting if it wasn't for what my dad does for us. We need his support to be able to pull that off. Less stability is, I think, another part of these family changes. Times are just harder than they used to be financially for a lot of families. We don't have the same kind of, essentially, younger generations have a much smaller slice of the economic pie than they did in the past. Housing is more expensive to go along with that. Most of the families that you're encountering are a lot less stable in terms of higher divorce rates, in terms of finances, in pretty much every single way than the families we would have been dealing with in the 50s and 60s. There's also the obvious more obligation. How many of us have complained about people having sports on a Sunday? I have complained about that. I think virtually every church leader has complained about that. Kids are pulled in so many different directions now. Families are pulled in so many different directions now. There are lots of different compelling ways that people spend their time, and it's harder for us to get a chunk of their time. So, along with some of these other community changes, just to get in a little more detail, those organic connections that used to be there, you knew your neighbor, you knew all the people in your local community, all of those things are essentially gone. We have much less organic connection than we used to have, which means that we are going to need to respond in sort of synthetic, newly adapted ways. We're not going to just be able to say to our neighbor who we know closely, who's been a part of the church for a long time, to come on down. We have to establish new connections. The other element of this that I think is very important is just the massive decline in institutional connections. In the 50s and 60s, people were more and more joining a bowling league from the classic book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam. They were more and more joining various different civic groups. They were more and more participating in their community. And when the 1970s and 80s came, all of those things are in rapid decline. People are less and less likely to be part of any civic group. And I think we've reached the point now where 30% of men in their 40s don't identify having a single friend. So people are just much less connected than they used to be. This is sort of the broad societal situation that we find ourselves in. So I want to talk about some of the Quaker manifestations of those societal changes. For pastoral friends, I think it will be obvious to you that we have had many splits and conflicts. Essentially every large pastoral meeting of friends has had a split. I would say Western Union Meeting has been somewhat immune to those, but we've surely had our conflicts. I don't think anyone would dispute that. This is part of that broader politicization of the church that I think everybody feels and observes, and we all feel the implications of those splits and conflicts. There's fewer of us than there used to be. I think there was a hope that as we split, we would find new life, but the reality is all of those splits tend to just leave us smaller. Not to say that there aren't great benefits to those splits, because I think sometimes there are. We're more free to be ourselves, but they have not resulted in us growing. The family changes that we talked about, where people are just busier and busier, really threaten our volunteer model as Friends. We are a strong lay leadership group. We have some discomfort, I think, in all branches of Friends with the idea of paid leadership, and volunteers just have less and less time to give. So we're going to need to find ways to respond to the fact that we're not going to be able to get the volunteer hours we used to get. I think we also, to some extent, have a leadership style of another era, because the leadership style that we relied on was this deep communal discernment process that, as people are busier and busier, becomes more and more difficult to manage. So I think virtually every yearly meeting in Quaker group has found itself transitioning towards something like where we deal with a lot of our issues through executive committee. We deal with it through smaller and smaller groups because we just don't have the time for those kinds of deep processes that we used to do. I think probably the biggest thing we deal with is we have a very insular culture based on being a very peculiar people, which obviously that had a lot of benefits for us in the past. Being a peculiar people gives us a strong culture where we were able to do good things. But as the wider culture has declined, and as the connections that rooted us all together have sort of been ripped out, we don't have the natural connections that we used to have. A lot of our younger people have disappeared, and we don't really have the skills for bringing in new people. We're used to being able to mature the people who are in our ranks, but we are not great at reaching out to new people and trying to bring them in. Next slide, Philip. Okay, so here are the biggest challenges that I see for us. And at this point, we're pretty good on time. So if you want to jump, if you have a burning question on your heart, jump in at me. So the biggest challenges, I think, are we are going to be facing a major fiscal cliff. This is not just Western Yearly Meeting. This is every single Quaker organization. You can look around the room. We're doing a lot better on young faces, but we are still predominantly older. And I can tell you that the age of our average donor definitely skews towards the higher end. We are going to lose a lot of people in the next 10, 15 years who give a lot of money to our organizations. And there is no way that the younger generations, who, as we've talked about, have a much smaller slice of the pie, are going to be able to pick up those donations that these older generations are given. We also have a lack of fundraising capacity. FUM was looking for a fundraising person for 2-3 years. We're not able to find someone to fill that role. We do not have the young people who want to do the work of raising money for our organizations to continue the work that we all feel really strongly about. Another element of this, I think, is because of all of these things slowing us down and kind of ripping apart our foundation that we've had, we don't really have any major projects to pitch right now. I will point out to you that, 70, 80 years ago, we won a Nobel Peace Prize for the work that we did as a community in the American Friends Service Committee. We are not at the point where we are going to do something similar in scale to that. If we are a people of transformative faith, which I think is essential to us as Quakers, you're not a part of us because of your creed. You're not a part of us because you're part of our communion. You're a part of us, you're a part of being Quaker, you're part of our community because of the faith that has transformed you. We did not have membership for years of our early friends. That only came later. The way that people knew you were a friend was that you lived very differently. And that's still the bedrock, I think, of our faith. What really brings us together is transformative living. And we are missing some of the key components that will be necessary for us to carry that work forward. So, obvious corollary here is the generation gap. We are missing a lot of younger friends. I think a lot of that is because we have not had the skills to do outreach to new people. The last 2 years, I've tried to really focus on bringing in some new younger people, and we have some younger faces, so I think it's when we put the energy towards it, it does work, but it's hard work to do, and we lack the young leaders to bring those people in. It's younger people who are going to bring in more younger people, and we need to focus our energies on trying to get more young leaders. It's why I think something like Early School of Religion is really essential for our work. It's really essential that we support them as a yearly meeting, because we need young leaders to help resolve this generation gap. We also, as I've said, we have an inward focus. We are not good at doing outreach because we haven't really done that much of it in the past. We've let our lives speak. But as our lives have become more disconnected, as our lives were kind of torn apart by various conflicts, I think our lives have spoken a little less than they did in the past. And now we need to learn how we can let our lives speak, both in transforming our lives, but also learning a little bit more about how we speak to the world today. We obviously all, I think, have some theological confusion, discomfort about outreach and planning that I think we need to talk about and to some extent just get over. We feel uncomfortable about the idea of evangelizing, which if we do have something good to offer, if we have new life to bring, then I think we have to be willing to go out and talk to folks about it.
Yeah, I didn't want to derail you, but I wanted to add a thought that I felt I needed to add. You talked about bringing in the young folks, and this came to something we had been talking about.
Jason, you should come up, if you don't mind.
I guess for something. The talk about young people came up a couple times this week. As we were talking up at Oak Haven in the evenings, because First Friends has done a lot of this, and we're actually having some success. But something I made as a comment that I hear from a lot of folks is we have a very welcoming atmosphere, but then people can't really grow roots because the expectation is you'll come, you'll join, and then you'll just replace what's here, and you'll just be part of the Quaker community. And it's not going to work like that. Too many people have been hurt by Christendom. They don't want to just be what's already here. So Quakerism is going to keep going. It's going to have to be willing to change and let the young people change it. They want to come somewhere and find a home. They want to come somewhere and root. But we have to be willing to let it be whatever it's going to turn into with them as part of it. The queer community, the neurodiverse community, the conservative community too. But they're going to have to change it because they're not going to be who you want them to be. They've seen the world turned upside down too many times. My generation is going to be who we're going to be. You're going to have to let go of the reins of replace us and do it this way and let them do it their way.
And they have to be embraced and loved.
They have to feel safe. So that's come up multiple times this week, and I kind of felt like I needed to put it out there for everyone to think about.
Thank you for sharing, Jason. I appreciate it. So that's some of the broad changes that we've experienced, some of the challenges we're facing, and I want to talk a little bit about sort of where I see the yearly meeting situation. One is we've actually embraced a lot of changes, which I really appreciate. I really appreciate the experimental faith that we've been living into lately. But I think we're going to have to continue on in that spirit, and as we deepen that, it will get at times more and more uncomfortable for us. And I will talk about that more as we go on here. But I'm also hearing a desire to grow and to try some new things. I think you just heard Jason speak to that, but I've also heard lots of older friends say, like, we need to do things differently. We want our tradition to continue. What are the things we can try? And as I have proposed things for us to do, I rarely run into somebody saying, very stubbornly, no, we can't try that new thing. We're a group that's actually pretty open to change, which is why I think we have a really strong possibility of being leaders in change amongst friends. What we also have is pretty obvious fear of conflict. I think for obvious reasons, there has been a lot of conflict in the yearly meeting over the last 30 years. I think it often goes untalked about, but you often feel the remnants of that conflict. I said I've never really had any like serious pushback about trying something new. The one thing I always hear though is, I can imagine somebody being upset by that. Not I would be upset by that, not I even know a specific person who would be upset by that, but I can imagine that there would be someone. And that to me is a pretty clear sign that we have some remnants of conflict that we need to talk about and work through if we are really going to thrive going forward. We are also pretty much all smaller meetings with less capacity than we used to have. Doesn't necessarily mean we're all small meetings. We have several larger meetings, but we have almost all of our meetings are smaller than they once were, and a lot of our meetings are very small and have less capacity than they used to have. So, to me, my natural thought process with this is that means we need to come together as a yearly meeting more and more to try and pull things off, because a lot of our meetings are going to be too small to offer their own Quakerism courses, to offer their own nurture and spiritual formation to younger people. Those are the kinds of things that we're going to have to do together for a time if we're going to regrow. I've also seen us have a real willingness to have some partnerships with other Quaker organizations and other yearly meetings, and I think that is a really vital part of what we're doing. In the same way that smaller meetings have less capacity, our yearly meeting in some sense has less capacity. Almost every other yearly meeting has less capacity. And by coming together, I think we can greatly increase our capacity. When I went down to North Carolina in the spring with Jade for her work, and I visited with the pastors there, and it was pretty clear that nobody had really gotten them together in several years. And they don't have the capacity to do that anymore. They don't have a yearly meeting structure that can pull that off. And I think we have a position to possibly be some strong leaders in the world of Friends, to bring together all of these different groups to do good works together that currently we're all sort of small and divided and unable to pull off on our own. Any thoughts or questions here? Della.
I'm going to put an infomercial right in here. Quaker Leadership Center will be doing a workshop November 13th to 15th on conflict in meetings. So please put that on your calendar and come and invite people in your meeting to come, because we need to talk about it. Go talk.
Yes, thank you, Della. Stephanie.
Della, you said November?
Yes. Maybe even November 13th to 15th?
Yes.
So I'm from the new Association of Friends, and as the clerk of the Committee for Nurture of Ministry, I have had the incredible blessing of being the person who ended up working with Sean and Tom and Jordan Snar from Wilmington, who was here earlier in the week, on planning events for pastoral ministers for nurture and care. And it has been a fabulous experience. Our pastoral ministers and new Association of Friends, until we had the first gathering in May of 23, had not been together since Indiana Yearly Meeting blew apart 10 years previously. And the last time we had been together had been in the context of incredible emotional and spiritual violence. And for us to gather as a group felt a little scary. We were the traumatized survivors in some ways. And we just now are starting in the new association to have a quarter-time person released for ministry. So everything is on a volunteer basis, most of it by too busy people. And the incredible gift of first Sean reaching out to us and saying, hey, would you guys be interested? And then Sean and Tom really provide the major energy. And Jordan and I support and help out. And it has been wonderful for our pastoral ministers and a great experience I won't speak for Jordan, a great experience for me. And it is, I don't think you guys intended it as a pilot project of what this can look like to do more together, but for me it has served that way, and I enthusiastically witness to the incredible gifts and energy there are when we come together to do things. You guys could probably pull it off for Western. We could not for Indiana, for New Association, and Wilmington could not. So I am really excited about the potential for greater collaboration.
Thank you, Stephanie.
I just wanted to add that it's not by accident that I came to share with you all here. Obviously, I was very grateful to receive the invitation, but I see amongst all of the section of the Americas, this part of the country and this particular yearly meeting being especially strong. And some of the capacity that you all have, especially, I think there has been a tendency over the years for Quaker institutions to be thought of as East Coast, Northeast corner centered. And I just don't see the same kind of enthusiasm and energy there that maybe we once had. And so I see that as a tremendous opportunity for you all. You all will likely host our next section meeting in a couple of years' time. I'm really interested for us within FWCC to invest in and build on that enthusiasm and capacity that we see here. So I hope you all see that and appreciate that amongst what you have moving in this part of the world.
Thank you, Elder.
Are we paying these guys?
We're not paying anyone to comment at this point.
I was going to share something. So there was we were not here always, obviously. And the place we were before, there was something akin to what happened in Indiana yearly meeting going on. When we got there, unbeknownst to us, and in our little meeting was like a microcosm of when we stepped into it. We did not know before and had no idea what had been happening before. And one of the things that was so helpful, because the meeting walked all the way through conflict, all the way through. And there was a time where one of our associate pastor was like, I think we need to learn how to communicate. And seriously, we were like, ugh. And we were in our 40s, Bob and I, and they were in their 50s, 60s. They had adult children who were starting to have children, and she came to the meeting like, I think I really am feeling led to have this communication course. And I can't remember what the communication course was, but we all took it. Everybody, from kids to grown-ups to 85-year-old people, we were in this communication course, and it was basic. And we realized, oh my gosh, we did not know how to have a meaningful conversation through conflict and be able to express in a caring and loving way what was our experience, and then hear what somebody else's experience was without taking it personally. Because we all have our experiences and we all get to say them, even if they're uncomfortable for someone else. It's not a blame. It's just this is just a thing. This is a real thing. And so walking through that together, our parents were there. Pop's parents went to our meeting, and this was like a whole it was beautiful actually, and we got all the way. We had these meetings every Sunday night. We talked, and people who were very different from each other shared soup in somebody's house, and that became so big we couldn't all fit in the home. And we became very, very close. And the meeting was okay after, and people all did their thing. I mean, whatever they were comfortable with. But in the end, there was like this healthy communication and love for each other that, and coming together. Like our parents got in a really bad car accident, and people were at our house taking care of it. They came and took our kids. We were their only kids, so we were like in 2 different hospitals, and they almost died, and it was like a big deal. And we were like, the whole meeting it was beautiful. And like there's new associations there too, but like there's nothing wrong with going back to the beginning and admitting that we might need to learn a little bit about what it means to talk to each other, and what it means to listen to each other, and what it means to see each other as people with lives and feelings and hearts, that all of them, pastor, not pastor, whatever you are, we feel it. And we live it, and we've got kids, and the kids are grown, and my gosh, we didn't expect to have a 22-year-old living in our house. And we didn't expect to have to pay for stuff for people that are grown. But that's how the world is. And now we're in a position that our parents were when we came out of school, and they were like, we're done, and we were taking care of ourselves. That's not how it is anymore.
Thank you, Sue. So I want to talk a little bit about how we can be a yearly meeting. I think the old model of the yearly meeting was one of authority. It ensured that there was unity in the group. It connected friends within the yearly meeting. It was really focused on cultivating Quaker identity, and it would lead the big projects that no monthly meeting could do. But it was based on the idea of sort of keeping people centered on a specific way of being. You know, going back to sort of that quietist period, that was stuff as perhaps insignificant, I would say, as like wearing the correct plain clothes, adhering to very rigid boundaries that are clearly not going to work for us anymore. So, to me, I think we need a new model of the yearly meeting, which is really focused on encouragement. And that's encouraging individuals, monthly meetings, the yearly meeting to really have an experimental faith and try things differently. And instead of just focusing ourselves within the yearly meeting, we're connecting friends across the yearly meetings, we're connecting friends across Quaker organizations, we're trying to grow deeper ties, because we know that people experimenting together is where our life is going to come from. And I think we still need to really work on cultivating a Quaker identity, but it's not about having a rigid identity, it's about having some grounding that we can take out beyond the yearly meeting. And it's not an identity that's meant to keep us simply peculiar. It's an identity that grounds us for work that goes out into our larger communities where we can show love. I think another big change is that the yearly meeting will have to do, a lot of other projects that we used to do at the monthly meeting level will need to be sort of more at a yearly meeting level, because we're smaller, we have fewer resources at each individual meeting. And we need to have projects that are more collaborative between monthly meetings that can account for that loss of capacity. Next slide, Philip. So I want to talk a little bit about change. And this fits with transformation and renewal, and talk about the experience of change. Anybody who's done sort of an organizational psychology course or done something with change theory will recognize this chart. So I see Catherine Griffith chuckling with her interim ministry training. This is a big part of it. I think we tend to think of change as just being kind of like flipping a switch, which it rarely is. It's not like we just go from one thing to the next thing. But in reality, we are in a process of moving from what was coming to an end, what's coming to a close, what we're letting go of, to this new beginning that we're experiencing. And those things are happening at the same time. And in between those two things is a neutral zone of change. And that neutral zone is defined by anxiety. That's the predominant feature of the neutral zone, is feeling anxious, feeling like we don't quite know where things are going, and that anxiety leads us to want to go back to the thing that is ending, the thing that we're losing, the thing that's coming to a close.
Send us back to Egypt.
Exactly, send us back to Egypt. Why did you bring us out here into the desert? That's the defining story of the neutral zone. When we get into the time where we're experiencing change and we know we're going towards something good that we all want, we still have this feeling of, ooh, this is scary, this is uncomfortable, I don't know what we're supposed to do next. And I will say to you that as Quakers, where we're all ministers, where we're all leaders, it's all of our jobs to remind each other that when we're having those feelings, that we're focused on a long-term goal, that we may be experiencing anxiety now, but that anxiety is normal. Feeling uncomfortable is normal when we are experiencing change, and that it's okay to feel that way, but we need to push through to the good things that we are working ourselves towards. So when we start to have that anxious feeling, when we start to see other people's have that anxious feeling about change, we need to hear their concern, tell them that we love them, and remind them that we are working towards something good together. All right, I want to talk about our models of discernment, which this is largely brought from the Quaker Connect model that my wife is helping lead in FWCC for congregational revitalization. The quietest model, which was the period of Friends history after sort of the earliest Friends period, the quietest model is about experiencing a leading. We have a sense that there's something that we want to do, and we enter into a period of discernment about it. And we wait for clarity from God on how we should act. But we only act once we have absolute clarity. And you may recognize this in smaller form when you've gotten some vocal ministry advice that you should wait and refine and see. Are you sure this comes from God? Are you absolutely sure this comes from God? Only speak it if you're sure that it comes from God. And I think the problem with that is that discernment and listening can be turned into a form of avoidance. If we're in a culture that's already anxious, that's already uncomfortable and not sure how it should move forward, if we're waiting for absolute clarity on moving forward with something, it probably means that we're not going to move forward with anything. So, I would like to turn us more towards this experimental model of faith, which you probably recognize that from George Fox talking about his having an experimental faith, experimental leadings, that where we experience a leading, and rather than waiting for clarity from God, we start trying something. We try some new thing. And in trying something, we're living out our faith rather than waiting for that clarity, and we start to reflect regularly on those new experiences. And as we reflect, we integrate the things that we learn from reflection into our experiments, but we continue trying new things. We're not waiting till we're absolutely certain. And we continue this sort of model of reflection and experiment and integrating those reflection. And then all of a sudden discernment comes about action instead of waiting for absolute clarity. So I think we are often stuck in this quietest model where we're largely avoiding acting because we can't be certain how we want to act. And what we really need to do is move towards this experimental model where we just try anything, move forward with what we have in front of us, do what we can do, see how it goes, and reflect together. But doing that model requires us to talk with each other openly and honestly and continuously to continue those kinds of experiments. Okay. So this is a very simple graph about managing complex change. And I'm curious if people have any thoughts about where we or your meeting has failed with complex change. Where one of the top line is how you get change. You have to have vision, you have to have skills, you have to have incentives, you have to have resources, and you have to have a plan. Where a box is blacked out is sort of the result you get. If you lack vision, you're going to end up with confusion. If you lack skills, you're going to end up with anxiety. Does this chart speak to anything you see in the yearly meeting or in your monthly meeting? I see heads nodding, but not a desire to share anything about what's in your head. Well, one thing I've noticed with my work in the yearly meeting is that I do end up with a lot of false starts. And I think that's because we largely don't have a plan for how we want to move forward. And we're making some steps on that. We have, the executive committee has decided on some important steps that we need to take. And we've started a task force that's going to look at some strategic planning. So we're thinking about the future. And I know I'm learning from my mistakes and trying to integrate those things into my experience a little bit more. And it's helping us get away from those false starts. But that's definitely one I experienced.
Can we go back a step to how you read the chart?
Yes. Okay. So the top line has changed. That's how you get to change. You have to have vision.
So you read the chart going across.
Read it going across. So if you lack vision in the second line, you get confusion. If you lack skills, you get anxiety. If you lack incentives, you get resistance.
Tom?
Ben?
Not that I would ever say my church has a problem with this. One thing that I have seen in many friends' meetings is that they have a hard time getting from vision to action plan. And they may know they have the skills, they may know they need to change, they may know they have the resources, but they can't even envision what they want because they don't know how to get there. What has sometimes been successful is almost putting the action plan into baby steps moving forward, even making the process itself part of the action plan. So the first step to change is, what is our vision? And that's part of the plan. And then what skills do we have, what incentives and resources and action, and all of that. But sometimes people see the elephant and they don't know how to eat it. Do you friends know how to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. But if they just try to imagine this idea of the promised land without being able to visualize, I need to put the next step forward into the desert, you know. But if you convince them that they can take one step and they can take the next step, they usually can get there. And if they can't get there, they can get somewhere. I think another really important part of all of this is to let them know that change is not always going to end up getting us exactly where we want to be or where we thought we were going to be. I've had so many different plans and projects in different churches over the years where I thought it was going to be one thing and it did not end up being that thing, or became something similar but different. But I will say, in most of my experiences, it was still something really amazing.
Okay, so I have a couple queries for us to close on because I know we're getting close on time, but I do want to turn back towards our theme verse a little bit in Romans 12, 1 and 2. And it talks about how we are called to lives of transformation, that our minds need to be renewed to live into that transformation. And I think I'm seeing the signs of a lot of that renewal of our minds going on. But the transformation part is the next big step that we're going to need to experience, where I think a lot of discomfort will come up. And one thing I want to sort of emphasize for us is that transformation doesn't require us being entirely new people or being an entirely new organization. I think God is clearly calling us to be a group that's similar to what we are. We're called to be a group of people who have a very wide, diverse range of theologies and thoughts. And our transformation is not going to be being totally different from that. I think our transformation is going to be being a more authentic version of that, where every single one of us can learn to be comfortable enough to be willing to risk talking about what it is that God is really calling us to, the ways that we feel like we've been hurt, either in this group or elsewhere, where we can share those things honestly and really feel loved by each other and really show that love to each other. And I think some of the conflicts in the past have stopped us from getting to that level of openness and intimacy with each other. And our transformation is going to be living out the call of Western Yearly Meeting, of trying to represent all these different groups of people, but doing it in a way when we can really be honest and open with each other and loving with each other. So my queries for you are, how can we move our faith and our processes to be more experimental? And what changes make you most uncomfortable? And what change do you most long for? So I think we're only going to have about 5 minutes here, but I will invite you into some time of worship.
I've been in Western Yearly Meeting since 2005. It has not always been peaceful. And for me, it has been very hurtful. I would like to add a couple other queries. Who is our God? Because the scripture says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And when I go to church to worship God and Jesus Christ, his son, who died for me. At times I feel like Western Yearly Meeting is more interested in being Quakers than being children of God. And my other question is, what are our diverse theologies? Because some theologies don't mix with others. You can't mix oil and water. And as I have listened to the hurts of those who moved from Indiana Yearly Meeting, I understand those hurts. But I also understand that there are theologies that cannot be blended. And like we talked about last night with loving and supporting Palestine, it's not an issue of loving one more than another, of loving one and hating the other. It's just, we need to love each other, but we also need to build a yearly meeting around common beliefs and common goals. And at some point, our beliefs may not mix. And I think that may be what happened in Indiana. And so those are my queries. Who is our God? And what are our diverse theologies? And how and can we blend those?
Great minds think along similar lines. And I got to thinking about where we start. And we talked about, Tom talked about the need for having a Quaker identity and sharing that Quaker identity. And that's absolutely right. We have a room full of Quaker identities. And that's where the discussion, that's where the dialogue needs to begin. We can't grow as a yearly meeting until we understand who we are, and we don't understand who we are. We are a multitude of Quaker identities in this room together. And we need to discover what we share. And we haven't worked on that for a long time. We haven't worked on what we share. There was one other thing. Now, Indiana yearly meeting gets beat up on a little bit. They did decide they wanted to define their Quaker identity. They did it in a way that was poorly thought out and didn't work well. And maybe we can show the way to discover who we are. Because I love being a Quaker. But behind that Quakerism is an incredible faith that carries me through my whole life. And Quaker identity can be very shallow or it can be very deep.
The Bible tells us that we are God's representatives here on earth. So if we are doing things that God would not want us to do, it will always fail. So we need to ask God what He specifically wants for each one of us individually, each church individually, and each yearly meeting individually. What does God want us to do? And to do that, we have to keep that connection with God and listen and find out what that is, and then we will be successful.
I'd like to speak on this because I feel led in a different way. I think we do have a united Quaker identity. And I just think maybe I just view this. It comes to me in a different way. The way that, the joy of being a Quaker, and for me, it's following Christ and that leading in my life. And what I love about Western Yearly Meeting, and I've been here for, I say a decade, I do that, and people find it annoying, but I do that for interviews, so I can just round it. But about 10 years, and I studied theology. And you can go to places with theology that is like, oh yeah, this theology is so good, right? And you can understand it, and then they're not living it, or it's uncomfortable and it's cold. And I want to say that we have an identity as a yearly meeting. Like this is a warm place. In this camp experience this time, I've been able to connect with so many of you. And the connections are these uplifting just experiences for me. And my son's made new friends. And we sometimes theology is important. It is. But the life of God together, I think, when I think of Western Yearly Meeting, that's what I think we are. And when I invite people to join us, that's what I want them to come do that. I want them to learn about Christ. I want them to be able to experience what it is to have like a large Quaker family. I didn't grow up in a Quaker family. I have a decent sized family. But it's like the meetings I have with you all, sure, we have disagreements sometimes on things, but I don't go away feeling bitter. I took the week off of work for this. I'm here, and my phone hasn't been working. I haven't been able to get it to actually do anything. And it's been so refreshing. Because I can't do any of this stuff anyways. So I just felt led to say, I think that we do have a lot of identity together. And I don't think we're as far apart as it may seem. So thank you, friends.
When Tom finished up, I was thinking of this picture. This is not my thought, this is something I've read. Theology is our attempt to hold God. And it makes God manageable. It smalls God, like you hold it in your hand. Faith is letting God hold you. And if we are identified by a group that is living a transformative faith, we are living with a God who's big enough to hold me. And if God's big enough to hold me, He's big enough to hold you. That is the thing that is the only thing we have that will unite us. Our theologies will not. I can say to you, I climbed up in a tree and fell, and it was wonderful. I cannot say to you that will happen for you. I walked into those woods yesterday, and I guarantee you will hurt yourself if you fall out of that tree. We cannot seek to replicate each other, but we can seek to find ourselves in the presence of God.
Sean and I went to a kindergarten parents cookout on Sunday afternoon, and it was in our neighborhood, and we didn't know any of the parents. We've lived in our neighborhood for 8 years. It was wonderful. In fact, one of our neighbors was on our same flight as our daughters to Portland, Oregon on Monday morning, so we had eyes on our daughters. But it has led to a conversation we've been having about micro-polarizations. We talk so much about, polarizations that are so extreme, and yet I feel, I'll speak deeply for myself. We're singing the songs this morning, and my instinct is, all the masculine pronouns for God. Can God ever represent my experience of embodiment? I would not use Jesus there, I would use Christ. And so I'm changing the words, right? Like we Quakers do sometimes. And then I thought, oh my gosh, I'm probably annoying the hell out of the people next to me. And I'm annoyed by this language. I thought, right, this is my own embodied experience of letting myself be reactive to this language instead of just be like, what a gift. I'm going to change some language, let people sing words that are right for them and build my muscle. I feel like I don't have a muscle for difference. And I've been trying really hard in the last couple of years to build my curiosity muscle and find sometimes I think I shut down because somebody uses language that doesn't resonate instead of being like, tell me what that means for you. tell me what love looks like in your life. Tell me who you are under there. And because I have also felt in this room that sometimes in a conversation, I'm like, I don't know what that means. But then if I say, like, tell me what that means, there's so freaking much richness in this room. I think this Quaker space is deep and beautiful. And if somebody asks me why your language, I'm like, because it's the integrity. I have to stand in my own integrity at the end of the day. And that's been my experience of God. And I think that's been other people's experience of God. And I want to build my muscle of finding richness in difference and that language. I think I probably said what I want to say, so I'll just.
There is a world of people out there starving for spiritual nurturance and guidance, seekers, and especially if you talk about younger people, you're talking about people who are looking for a spirituality that is not bound up in hardcore orthodoxy, that's a spirituality that is not rigidly exclusive, a spirituality that can encompass science and the vast knowledge that we're learning about the universe and where the physical and spiritual may meet. They're looking for a spiritual environment in which they can, and here's my favorite word, they call me, in the Sunday school class that I go to, they call me Evolution Ed. And so they're looking for an evolving spirituality that they can grow into. And, if we believe that there is that of God in every person, we can extrapolate that to there is God in all of the creation. And this is inviting, I think. I came to Quakerism through love. I was literally fell in love with Quakerism and I fell right into it, and it feels like a big tent to me, at least in theory. And so I say we have an opportunity here. We have a tent, or we have a religion, a theology, a spirituality that's broad enough to bring in the many, many, many seekers that are out there.
I won't even bother because I thought this whole year.
I've really been touched by all your comments. It is good to speak out of the silence. It's not enough just to sit and wait. We have to speak as we feel led. Romans 8:14 says, "Those who are led by the Spirit of God are the children of God." As Quakers continue to be led by God, we will continue to be the children of God. I know we have many disagreements. Sometimes we don't understand the leadings that other people have. And probably somebody who stood up here, maybe me, you thought, I can't believe that person said that. I can't believe you're thinking that. We move in an imperfect world where we do not always see the next step. But as we continue to have faith, we take the next step. And we do the best that we can. Let's continue to be kind to one another, to listen to one another,
called to come here. When I was starting my journey as a Christian, I used to think that there was only one way to be Christian, and that was, like having proper shirts, proper pants, proper shoes, and everything. And the only way to serve in ministry was either to be a pastor or a worship leader. And when I through FWCC, I knew other kinds of Quakers. I was thinking to myself, what am I doing here? And I discovered that there are Quakers that are not, that are non-theists and that are into mysticism and all other kinds of things that to me was really far away from Christianity. And then coming back to my yearly meeting, I thought, well, we are all on the same line. But in my yearly meeting in Bolivia, and in my yearly meeting in Bolivia, I kind of saw other churches doing different practices and having this kind of different approach to Christianity, and I thought to myself, what am I doing here as well? But then a friend of mine who passed away very recently said, we Quakers are here to bring the kingdom of heaven into earth and live it. And we can find, we don't have to agree with someone to love that person. And though I still remain strongly Christian, I believe in Jesus. I believe that Jesus saved my life. And every day I'm trying to look my life into the light of Christ. But my compassion for other people has increased. I don't believe that as a Christian I am like I am higher than other faiths, or that I am, or I believe that Christianity to me makes the most sense. Quakerism for me is the best way to be Christian. But yet there is so much that I don't know and that I have learned. And if I look at myself in the past, it's like though I remain Christian, but it's a different person from me 10 years ago. And that I think that's how our churches continue to develop theology. You can still remain there. I think there are certain core beliefs that I think should help us together. But then there are some certain aspects of the church that are negotiable, that might be attached to cultural expectations. In Bolivia, we don't make a great job of, we have a certain culture in the church, how you should approach customs when you have lunch, when you have dinner, and it's like the Christian thing to do is to do those customs and things like that. And I mean, we don't do a very good job at understanding other cultures here in this country, which is like very much multicultural, I think the approach to different cultures is vital. And as the friend who spoke before me said, there are people, seekers, young people. I am among those young people. People from other cultural backgrounds who resonate deeply, and Quakerism makes sense to them and to me. But maybe we put a wall on by attaching to cultural norms that might not be necessarily theology. And I think the church should be open. We put a sign, all are welcome. Are they really? Are they really? Or are we attaching ourselves with too much norms? More than one time, I've heard people who joyfully, sing in silent worship, and not here, but in other meetings would elder them because it's a moment of silence. We're just allowed to stand, but that's just an example of how we attach to tradition and we close the door to people despite saying all are welcome.
Sorry to delay us for the talk. Something Mish said earlier that got me thinking about faith and theology. And I've learned theology and philosophy and logic since I was little. For those of you who know my dad, his idea of parenting was collegiate level philosophy and logic debates.
Absolutely.
So I won't ever discredit those who use it, because even my dad uses it to approach the divine. Some people know he's now Catholic.
Jason.
Sorry, I'm still not good with mics and talking in front of people. And so I'll never tell someone don't use theology if that's how you find truth and approach the divine. But faith gets others there. For me, it was a relationship. I knew all the theology. I could answer all the questions. I was that kid. But it wasn't until our lives were turned upside down in North Carolina and I actually finally confronted God and yelled at him. And he answered back. And I was like, oh crap, you're real. That it became real. It was a relationship. And I think that's what motivated me then to go into family medicine, where teaching changes people, but relationships change people. I know my patients. I walk with them through their crap. And they're all just people. I have patients who are queer, as liberal as you can get. I have family and friends who are that. And then I have patients who walk in wearing their MAGA hats, and my personal views would be upset. But I give them my all because they're my patients, and they're the most wonderful, complicated, awful, miraculous people. They're all just people. And I wish we'd all just see each other that way. Because at the end, I think the relationships, whether they're in person or some other form, is what's going to knit us back together. And maybe that's something we can form as part of our identity, relationship with the divine and relationship with each other.
Several years ago, this yearly meeting kind of split, and my meeting, specifically my pastor, would have been the cause. And there was a period of time for, I don't know, a year or two, when if somebody saw Mike Fairfield on my name tag, they would go sit someplace else, or they would turn around and avoid me. And I think Dinah experienced the same thing. So it was really uncomfortable. But when it came up on the floor of the early meeting, discussing rescinding Phil's recording, Dan Carter stood up and he said, "We at Rucherville do not agree with Phil's theology, but we do not want to be out of fellowship in the early meeting." Exactly what you were just talking about. And we have worked that out. And, this right now we had 8 people from Fairfield who were attending these sessions, which that's unusual, but, usually it's 2 or 3. But it was the grace that the early meeting showed to us. And people didn't even think about the fact that our meeting does not totally agree with our pastor, some of us. And, some of us totally disagree. But anyhow, it was the grace of the early meeting to keep us in fellowship and to not split. Now, some meetings did leave because they could not live with that. But we appreciate the community of Western Early Meeting and like I said, the grace that they have shown us, and that's all I have to say.
I'll try to be brief, but coming back to the way I answered, I think it was Sean's question on the first night of what brought you to Friends and what keeps you here. There are a lot of different ways I can answer that, but I'll share what I shared then, which is when I was in high school. I went to Cowan High School, graduating class of 50, about 250 students across the high school and middle school. It was not a friendly, safe, loving place to be a queer, punkish kid trying to figure themselves out. And students and teachers alike participated heavily in bullying, abuse, things like that. And I had one teacher, an English teacher, whose name was Barb Miller, who I had heard was a little weird also because she was a Quaker. And people could never quite figure out what that meant about her, but they knew it made her weird, and that wasn't a particularly great thing to be there. And she was just kind to me. If I wrote poetry outside of class, she would read it and respond to me. When I showed signs of being, self-hating and self-destructive and physically self-harming, she showed concern instead of ignoring or encouraging it the way that others did around me. And I remembered that, and I don't know what her theology was. I don't know if she was affirming or not, or any of those details necessarily, but I remembered the love that she showed to me. And when I came to Friends later in life, because I passed small Quaker meetings out in New England when I was out there for 15 years, I had a hope that has very often been confirmed, that same ability to show love and to show someone that you care about them and to be held and hold in return was available there. And while we all need to practice it and are not perfect at it, my goodness, myself included, it is definitely something that I have seen time and again among friends, and that is the answer of what keeps me here, the same thing that brought me here.
Jesus had a prayer that I think it's the only prayer that we ever hear Jesus pray that
has not been answered yet. I can't go any higher, so that's the best you can get. Sorry. He's praying for the disciples, praying to God and said, may they be one as we are. And I think one of the testimonies of Quakers, it's not in our list of spices, but is that we refuse to draw a circle that puts people out. We have no statement of belief. Because as hard as it is to sit with the theological tensions, we don't draw people out of the circle. There's this author and educator I love, Edward Markham. He writes this: he drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, thing to flout. But love and I had wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. I think that's the Quaker testimony. That is a Quaker testimony. We draw circles that are bigger. I have been through church split after church split, and I have watched all sorts of theological issues divide and separate us over time. And one of the things that drew me to the Quakers a couple of years ago is that we actually live out this testimony. We help make this prayer that Jesus never came true. But among us, in this place, as we sit here in Western Ely meeting with people who will say things from both sides of every spectrum you could possibly think of, we live out that prayer so that Christ's words can be true. As uncomfortable as it may be, may we continue to live that out.
Friends, Jesus said in Matthew 16, verse 25, "For whoever wants to save their life will lose it. But whoever loses their life for me will find it." We have seen not just this yearly meeting, but other yearly meetings that we have been a part of, that we have loved. Over time, we have seen them struggle to figure out, how can we regain our vitality? How can we save our lives? And we have seen those yearly meetings, the life in those yearly meetings, continue to ebb away. So we've had some queries this morning, and I would just like to suggest this query. What would it look like for Western Yearly Meeting to lose its life for the sake of Jesus?
Friends, there is splits everywhere, including where I come from, in Kenya. In Kenya alone, we have more than 20 year meetings. But this year, they decided we can come together strongly. We have had Friends Church in Kenya, yes, as a name, for many years. But this year, it was like, we can do things together. One thing that makes me to be a proud Quaker is Quakers focused on things, on injustices that were happening. And they stood out to be the light. We have a rich history that we can look unto it and say, what is making us today to focus on the splits, on the divisions, rather than being the light.
to the injustices that are happening around the world? How can we be a people who can go out and continue focusing on the things that the structures, the governments, the systems are no longer helping? How do we continue to focus on helping the poor, on helping the needy, on uniting together so that when we go out, we continue being the light? Let's remember our history, even in this country, with the slavery. Quakers were on the forefront of like, hey, let's sit down, wait a minute. Is it right to hold another human being as a slave? Let's remember when we went to the lands outside this land to preach Christ. And we did not just go and tell them Jesus loves you. We built schools. We built hospitals. We dug wells. So I think today we are focused more on us versus them. And it is killing us. It is destroying us. It is making us to become smaller and smaller every day. Let us be the light. Let us see each other as people who are created by one God, who loves all equally.
Clearly, we all have a lot to say. But lest we incur the wrath of our clerk, I think at this point we need to move forward. I really appreciate everyone's sharing, your willingness to talk. It's clear I think we need to do more of that together. Let's pray. God, help us to be the light. Help us to see your light in each person. Help us to hear your word in their words. Help us to feel your love in their presence. Help us to grow. Help us to become your people. Continue to be our guide, Lord, and help us to be a guide to those who are in need. Grow us into a people who can spread your love across this world. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
As our clerks are coming up to read our final epistle, is that right? We have that? Okay.